So, I just finished Secret Invasion. Well, kind of. This was the first Disney Plus series where I just couldn't really be bothered to watch it all that much. An episode would come out, and I never had a sense of urgency to go see it. And when I would, I just have it on in the background while I did other things. This is a fairly decent disappointment because the original storyline evoked totally grander and different emotions than the adaptation. And it's not a disappointment because it wasn't exactly like the adaptation either. Plenty of Marvel movies and shows adapt storylines that aren't at all like their comic counterparts. Captain America Civil War isn't anything like that comic, and the movie ended up being better. But unfortunately, Secret Invasion is yet another disappointment in this new saga of Marvel films, which has me wondering, has Marvel officially fallen apart? Well, let's get into it. Secret Invasion was a surprise to me in that I didn't even know it was coming out. It seemed like the marketing for this was practically non-existent, and the stuff that was advertised felt pretty dull. I was shocked one day when I opened Twitter, and no, I'm not calling it this, and saw that the series was premiering like the next day. It had some cool stuff, like sometimes you would see regular news broadcasts, and there would just be a random Skrull walking around in the background. But there was pretty much no emphasis on the marketing, and it failed to bring any sort of excitement to the table. It really felt that this time, not many people cared to tune in, and if they did watch it, they didn't care to talk about it. But poor marketing and fan buzz aside, what did I think of the actual quality of the show? It was okay. I'd say as per usual with these Marvel shows, the potential is there, but it just can't deliver due to shallow character development, bizarre pacing, and a lack of focus. I think the idea of turning the Secret Invasion plotline from the comics, which is like this massive universal threat, into a paranoia, espionage political thriller that's focused on Nick Fury is a great idea. I'd say I actually don't care about having 50 superheroes all turning out to be Skrulls and having it be this huge crossover. It's actually better for me that it stays more personal and grounded, but the only thing it needed to take away was, in my opinion, is the tone and feeling of paranoia. I wanted to constantly be suspicious of everyone, questioning everything I know, and just be on the edge of my seat through natural tension building. And that can easily be done with anyone. It doesn't have to be a bunch of recognizable superheroes. But unfortunately, the people that we do see on screen, I never cared for, and the show hardly did anything to invest me. I'm not questioning whether Olivia Colman's character is a Skrull, if Talos has an ulterior motive, if the president is a Skrull, or whatever. The only person that you're a little unsure about is Rhodey, and it's completely obvious that he is a Skrull because he's basically done nothing in the MCU since Civil War, and it wouldn't affect much having him be a Skrull. So when the eventual reveal does happen, it just doesn't matter. It also happens in the most anticlimactic way as well. I think most people saw this and went, oh, okay. And I don't really envy them trying to build shock and suspense with this, because the problem with turning any Avengers or main characters into Skrulls is that it removes a lot of depth from those characters. It's like, oh, okay, that person I just saw for the past few years in the MCU just turned out to not actually be that person? Huh, okay. So yeah, it's like they just picked the one character who's had almost no development because it wouldn't affect much. The whole show is basically writing on stuff like this, and if it doesn't work, the show and most of its tension building and intrigue doesn't work. So let's talk about Fury. First of all, I think it's really cool that he's taking center focus for once, because he's mainly just been this mysterious guy that pops up as a supporting character in most of the Marvel movies, and Samuel L. Jackson is also one of the most talented actors in Hollywood, so he did feel a little underutilized. In Secret Invasion, Fury has returned to Earth to deal with a looming Skrull crisis. Personally, he's grappling with guilt over losing loved ones, marital problems, and potentially losing his touch because he's getting old. This is confusing because you never really see him out of his element all that much. You just have the show repeatedly tell you Fury is old and that he sucks now. Like, a lot. It just sucks that you have 6 episodes dedicated to him and it's still so underdeveloped. Now let's move on to our main villain, Gravik, the leader of the Skrull Resistance, who is plotting a covert campaign to take over Earth and make it their new home after Fury failed to deliver on his promise to find them a new one. Gravik is interesting because he's yet another villain who was the one who was genuinely screwed over, but to make him into a proper villain, they have to have him do overly horrendous things to remind the viewer that they're watching a villain. So Gravik was basically this young kid where Fury recruited him and told him and all the other Skrulls that he would find them a new home. But 30 to 40 years later, Fury hasn't done anything for them. Fury is someone who genuinely messed up here, and I felt that was never accurately portrayed. The rest of the supporting cast also doesn't add much, unfortunately. It's a shame because he has so much talent here on screen. Emilia Clarke is such a great actress, but has the most generic things to do. Ben Kingsley Adir does a great job and really shines in some aspects, but his character just never quite gets the depth it needs to truly shine. Olivia Colman is fantastic, but that's really just because she's Olivia Colman and has nothing to do with the character. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if all her dialogue was just improvised. Ben Mendelsohn, I mean, you can't not love that guy. Don Cheadle has some fun stuff here as well, and is mainly great when he's acting opposite of Samuel L. Jackson, who is also putting on a great performance, perhaps his best ever as Nick Fury, actually. Oh, and Colby Smulders was done really dirty. Like, I actually kept waiting for her to come back as a surprise twist, because I really didn't think they'd just kill her in such an anticlimactic way. But oh well, point being, the cast here is pretty excellent. What is also pretty excellent are the themes, the tone, the monologues, and everything that it's trying to set up. Where it falters is, well, in delivering any of it. It's funny because a lot of people were talking about this show as if this would be Marvel's Andor, as in it would be a very mature adult show that completely strayed away from what the IP is mainly known for, and well, we got $212 million budget, by the way, but I really shouldn't have been surprised. Most of these shows just randomly end in nonsense for some reason. Like, rest in peace to the people watching this for expecting a gritty and grounded finale that the show was building towards. Instead, you get really generic dialogue like this.
You killed my mother, my father. You're flailing. You're weak.
And a bunch of CGI battles that you don't care about. The finale does a lot of other whack stuff. I'd say one of the only good scenes in this episode is the scene where Gravik and Fury have a chat, and Gravik is just going off in a fit of rage. There's some really good acting and emotional backstory with Gravik, and then it gets completely ruined because it wasn't even the real Fury talking to Gravik. Gravik's entire motivation was because of what Fury did to him, and their final confrontation together wasn't even actually him? That's such bad writing, all for simple shock factor, which gets worse because of the fight that takes place right after. Watching this just made me realize that this actually could have been a really cool mid-season finale. The stuff that happens at the end is far more interesting for a show. Basically, the president advocates for mass violence and war against the Skrulls, which is terrifying enough because the president should never advocate for violence, but what makes it more terrifying is that the people don't really know who the Skrulls are. So we get this brief montage of people just murdering news reporters, political officials, and more just out of cold blood. What do you do in this situation where the president is actually advocating for stuff like this? This gives so much more depth and motivation for the Skrulls to hate humans, and an interesting moral dilemma for Fury because he has to choose between the Skrulls and the humans, even though he's already conflicted about both of them. But instead, the show basically just wraps up here. After 4 years of build-up since Captain Marvel, this was our conclusion. Well, time to watch the Marvels, where I'm supposed to have knowledge on like 20 other things to understand it. Yay. So back to the question. Is the MCU falling apart? I think that's honestly an easy yes. Even the CEO of Disney is like, yeah, there's too many of these things and the content has been diluted. So if even he's saying that, you know you got a problem. Taking a glance at the upcoming Marvel movies and shows, and I gotta say, I'm just not excited for like 80% of them. Do we really need an Agatha, Echo, Ironheart, Wonder Man, or Vision Quest show? No. And honestly, it may not even be a case of needing it, because I'd say a Secret Invasion Disney Plus show is completely justified, but then it ended up being like this. So even if there is a good story or premise behind it, it doesn't really matter because of the very simple issue, which is that the scripts just aren't very good. And this is probably due to the fact that Kevin Feige is usually the genius behind most of these things, and since there are so many projects, he simply doesn't have the time to properly oversee them. I mean, it is kind of silly that an executive like him would have to be responsible for the creativity and the writing instead of the actual creatives, but that's a whole nother topic. The MCU is just getting, well, boring. It's sad that I look at these projects and just kind of shrug my shoulders at them. And yeah, I can just stop watching these things and move on when I don't like them, but I truly do want to care. The MCU meant a lot to me and many others, and I just want the movies and shows to be good. That's why I keep talking about them. But it really has become a struggle, and if the MCU wants to survive, they really need to start taking their time with these projects instead of focusing on the quantity of it. Also, let's try to not find an excuse to use an AI intro next time, thank you very much. But what do you guys think? Is Marvel falling apart? Have you been liking everything they've been putting out recently? Have you even been watching them? Regardless, I'd love to know what you guys think down below. And if you liked the video, remember to leave a like and subscribe, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Peace.